The amber glow of Judge Marcus Washington's office lamp cast long shadows across his mahogany desk as he reviewed his final draft. 20 years on the federal bench had taught him that words mattered, especially the ones he would deliver tomorrow in what might be the most significant civil rights decision of his career. He rubbed his temples, the late October evening having stretched well past 9 o'clock. His phone buzzed, illuminating his daughter Maya's face on the screen. "Don't tell me you're still at the office, Dad," she teased. "You know my graduation speech is tomorrow at noon, right?" The first Washington to get a master's degree deserves her father bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. "Just finishing up, sweetheart," Marcus replied, smiling at the gentle reminder. "This ruling isn't going to write itself." He slipped the draft into his leather briefcase, a 20th anniversary gift from his colleagues that still carried the rich scent of new leather. The irony wasn't lost on him. 2 decades of breaking barriers as one of the few black federal judges in the state, and tomorrow he'd watch his daughter break another. The courthouse parking garage echoed with his footsteps as he made his way to his car, a modest Lexus that his wife insisted befitted a federal judge. The night guard, Joe, offered his usual warm greeting. "Working late again, Your Honor. One of these days, Mrs. Washington's going to have my head for not kicking you out earlier." Marcus chuckled, adjusting his bow tie, a habit from his early days as a prosecutor. "Let's keep this one between us, Joe. 20 years without a missed dinner is a record I'd like to keep intact." He didn't mention that Charlotte was out of town at a medical conference, presenting her research on racial disparities in cardiac care. The drive home started routinely enough. The streets of downtown were quiet, with only the occasional late-night worker or student hurrying along the sidewalks. Marcus took his usual route, past the Civil Rights Memorial where he'd sworn his oath of office, its eternal flame flickering against the night sky. His mind wandered to tomorrow's ruling, a case involving systematic discrimination in housing loans. The evidence had been damning, but the pushback from certain quarters had been fierce. His phone buzzed again, this time a text from Maya. "Dad, don't forget to wear your purple tie tomorrow. It matches my graduation robe." The smile was still on his face when the red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Marcus checked his speedometer, 2 miles under the limit. His turn signals had been perfect. His lights were on. 20 years of judicial experience told him this stop had nothing to do with traffic laws. He pulled over carefully, positioning his car to ensure it would be in full view of the street cameras he knew were mounted at this intersection. Following the procedure he'd advised countless others to use, he placed his hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and waited. His heart rate elevated slightly, not from fear, but from the familiar frustration of knowing what was coming. The officer approached, flashlight beam intentionally angled to blind his side mirror. Marcus caught a glimpse of the nameplate. "Officer J. Barrett." "License and registration," Barrett demanded, his tone carrying that edge Marcus had heard too many times in his courtroom. "Good evening, officer," Marcus replied evenly, maintaining his judicial composure. "I'm going to reach for my credentials now. I'm Judge Marcus Washington of the Federal District Court." He moved slowly, deliberately. Barrett's laugh was short and harsh. "Sure you are. And I'm the president. Step out of the vehicle." As Marcus carefully complied, his phone lit up once more. "Maya again. Found your old graduation photo, Dad. Can't believe you rocked that fro in law school." The image of that hopeful young law student flashed in his mind as the situation began to spiral out of control. In the next few minutes, Marcus Washington would experience a profound shift, from dispensing justice to desperately seeking it. Little did Officer Barrett know, this traffic stop would ignite a firestorm that would change not just their lives, but an entire system. Officer Barrett's flashlight beam crawled deliberately across Judge Washington's federal credentials, lingering on the official seal. The night air grew thick with tension as a second patrol car pulled up silently, its lights off. Marcus recognized the deliberate intimidation tactic, one he'd heard testified about countless times in his courtroom. "Step away from the vehicle," Barrett commanded, his right hand resting meaningfully on his holster. As Marcus complied, the realization hit him. He knew this officer. 3 years ago, Barrett had stood in his courtroom, defending Officer Michael Reynolds in a misconduct case. Marcus had ruled against Reynolds, and Barrett's testimony had crumbled under cross-examination. "Hands where I can see them," Barrett's partner called out, emerging from the shadows. Young, maybe fresh from the academy, Officer Chen looked uncertain but followed Barrett's lead. Marcus raised his hand slowly, his gold wedding ring catching the harsh street light. "Officer Barrett," Marcus said calmly, "I believe we've met before. I'm Judge Washington from the Federal District Court. There seems to be a misunderstanding." "On your knees," Barrett cut him off, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Now." Marcus's phone buzzed again in the car. Maya's third call. He could see her contact photo lighting up the dashboard, her graduation cap tilted at a proud angle. The same daughter who'd be waiting for him tomorrow, expecting to see her father in his judicial robes, not an orange jumpsuit. "I'm going to respectfully decline that order, Officer Barrett," Marcus replied, his judicial authority evident in his measured tone. "There's no legal basis for this escalation. I suggest we—" The situation exploded in seconds. Barrett lunged forward, while Chen hesitated visibly. "Resisting arrest," Barrett shouted, loud enough for the gathering audience of late-night pedestrians to hear. Phones emerged from pockets, recording lights blinking in the darkness. As Barrett roughly grabbed his arm, Marcus caught a glimpse of something unexpected. A small Black Lives Matter pin partially hidden under Chen's collar. The young officer's eyes met his, showing conflict and fear. "Officer Chen," Marcus said quietly, using the same tone he used to calm heated courtroom situations, "you have a duty to intervene." Chen's hand tightened on his own holster, torn between training and conscience. Barrett's grip tightened painfully. "Shut it, Your Honor," he sneered, the title dripping with contempt. "Not so high and mighty now, are we? Remember Michael Reynolds?" "Well, I remember you." The handcuffs clicked shut, cold steel against Marcus's wrists. Through the growing crowd, a familiar face caught his attention. Maria Gutierrez, a court reporter from his building. Her phone was raised, blood streaming everything. She gave him a slight nod, her jaw set with determination. "Officer Barrett," Marcus said loudly, ensuring the recording devices would catch every word, "I want to inform you that you're currently violating United States Code Title 18, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. The fact that this arrest is retaliatory for my judicial decisions makes this a federal offense." Barrett's response was to wrench Marcus's arms higher behind his back, drawing a sharp intake of breath. Funny how you can't read the simple traffic laws, but you can quote federal code. Add threatening an officer to the charges. Chen finally spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. "Sergeant, maybe we should." "Shut up, rookie," Barrett snapped. "Either help me get him in the car or turn in your badge tomorrow." As they pushed him toward the patrol car, Marcus caught his reflection in the window. His bow tie was askew, his judge's pin glinting on his lapel. The same pin Maya had given him when he was sworn in. 20 years of building respect, dignity, and authority were being stripped away in 20 minutes. His phone rang one final time as they pushed him into the back seat. Through the window, he could see Maya's message. "Dad, found the perfect quote for my speech tomorrow. Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. You taught me that." As Barrett slammed the door, Marcus allowed himself a slight smile. The officer had no idea he'd just set in motion events that would shake the entire department to its core. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, justice wore unexpected disguises. The holding cell's fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly, casting harsh shadows across the graffiti-covered walls. Judge Marcus Washington sat on the metal bench, his tailored suit now wrinkled, studying the crude inscription before him. "Justice is dead, 2024. 20 years of sentencing people to these cells, and now he was experiencing the other side of the system he served. First time. The question came from a young man in pressed khakis and a polo shirt, looking as out of place as Marcus felt. His college ring caught the flickering light. Howard University, class of 2024. Carlos Rodriguez, the young man offered, extending his hand. I was supposed to be practicing my scholarship acceptance speech right now. Instead, I'm here for matching the description. 5'9" Hispanic male with a backpack. Apparently that's probable cause these days. Marcus felt his stomach twist. The Martinez Foundation Scholarship, he asked, already knowing the answer. Carlos's eyes widened in recognition. Yes, sir. The ceremony's tomorrow at the federal courthouse. Judge Washington is supposed to. Carlos's voice trailed off as realization dawned. Wait. You're him. Before Marcus could respond, Officer Barrett's voice boomed through the cell block. Special delivery. He approached with another officer, unlocking the cell. Got some company for you, Your Honor. Figured you should see how the other half lives. They shoved in 3 more men, all young, all minorities. Marcus recognized the pattern. He'd seen it in countless statistical reports on his desk. One of them, barely 18, nursed a bruised wrist. Your daughter's been calling the station, Barrett announced with satisfaction. Told her daddy's a bit tied up tonight. Guess she'll need a new graduation speaker. After Barrett left, Carlos turned to Marcus. Judge, everyone in my neighborhood knows about you. You're the one who ordered the investigation into police quotas last year. Is that why? Marcus adjusted his bow tie, a habit that felt absurd in the current situation. Partially, but it's more personal. Officer Barrett was a character witness in a case I presided over. His friend lost his badge. The youngest detainee spoke up. I know that case. Officer Reynolds. He planted evidence on my cousin, but you threw it out. He paused. I'm Jamal. Was heading to my night shift at the hospital when they stopped me. My supervisor's probably trying to fire me right now. Marcus pulled out a small notebook from his jacket. They'd missed it in the pat-down. Give me your supervisor's name. And Carlos, what time is your scholarship ceremony? Noon, Carlos replied. But Judge, what are you? I've spent 20 years working within this system. Marcus interrupted, his pen moving across the paper. I've tried to change it from the bench. But sometimes, he looked at the bruised wrist of the youngest detainee. Sometimes you need to experience something firsthand to truly understand it. Through the night, Marcus listened to their stories. Each one represented a failure of the system he'd sworn to uphold. Carlos's academic achievements meant nothing when a robbery suspect's description matched half the Hispanic men in the city. Jamal's hospital ID was ignored because he looked suspicious walking to work. Around 3 a.m., Officer Chen appeared, looking uncomfortable. Judge Washington, your wife's on the phone. She's cut her conference short and is flying back. And there's something you should know. The videos are everywhere. #Judge in Cuffs is trending. Marcus stood, approaching the bars. Officer Chen, remember your oath. The one you took to protect and serve. I saw your pin earlier. You know this isn't right. Chen glanced nervously over his shoulder. Sir, I've submitted my body cam footage to Internal Affairs. The backup camera too. The one Barrett doesn't know about. But be careful. He's been making calls, trying to make sure you stay here through your daughter's graduation. As Chen hurried away, Marcus turned back to his cellmates. In the harsh fluorescent light, he saw something he'd missed from the bench. The human cost of systemic failure. Each man here represented thousands more, their lives disrupted or destroyed by prejudice wearing a badge. Carlos, he said quietly, change your speech for tomorrow. Tell them what you saw tonight. Sometimes the best education happens outside the classroom. The graffiti caught his eye again. Justice is dead. 2024. Below it, he could just make out a newer edition. But truth lives. Dawn was approaching, and with it, a decision. Continue working within the system, or tear it down and rebuild? The answer, Marcus realized, might lie somewhere in between. Maya Washington's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard, her social media activism skills in full force. Her Harvard Law dorm room had become a command center, multiple screens displaying the growing outrage across platforms. The video of her father's arrest had exploded overnight, with hashtag Judge in Cuffs and hashtag Justice for Judge competing for the top trending spot. 3 million views in 6 hours, her roommate Sarah announced, monitoring another screen. And CNN just picked it up. Your dad's arrest is officially national news. Maya paused, her eyes fixed on a new notification. Wait, someone just leaked the body cam footage. She clicked play, her hand covering her mouth as Officer Barrett's voice filled the room. Let's show His Honor what real power looks like. But it was the next video that changed everything. Officer Chen's backup camera footage appeared on her screen, showing events from 20 minutes before the traffic stop. Barrett's patrol car was parked outside the courthouse, waiting. That's right, Barrett's voice crackled through the speakers. Washington always leaves late on Wednesdays. Time he learned what happens when you mess with one of our own. This was premeditated, Sarah whispered. They were hunting him. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Landing in 30 minutes. Your father's still in holding. They're deliberately delaying his processing. Don't worry about graduation. This is more important. But Maya had other plans. She opened her video editing software and began splicing together clips. Her father presiding over civil rights cases, mentoring young lawyers of color, receiving his judicial appointment. Then the arrest footage, followed by Chen's damning recording. Finally, she added statistics on racial profiling and traffic stops. What are you doing? Sarah asked, watching the screen. Making sure everyone sees the whole story, Maya replied, her voice steel-edged. Dad taught me that context is everything in law. Time to put my social justice degree to work. The police department's PR team never stood a chance. Their initial statement defending the arrest as a routine traffic stop was demolished within minutes of Maya releasing her video. Comments flooded in from lawyers, judges, and civil rights activists across the country. Even the governor tweeted a demand for immediate investigation. Then came the surprise that would shift the narrative entirely. Officer Chen, his voice disguised, but his badge number visible, appeared in an interview with a major news network. This wasn't just about Judge Washington, he revealed. There's a group within the department that specifically targets successful minorities. They call it Humble Pie Service. I've been documenting everything since I joined the force. Maya's phone exploded with notifications. Her video had been shared by major civil rights organizations, celebrities, and politicians. Hashtag #HumblePJustice started trending, with people sharing their own stories of police harassment. In her graduation gown, Maya stood before her mirror, adjusting the purple sash that marked her master's degree in social justice and public policy. Her speech notes lay forgotten on her desk. She wouldn't need them. The ceremony was in 2 hours, and her father was still in custody. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Ms. Washington. The voice was familiar. Officer Chen. Your father's being released in 20 minutes. Barrett tried to delay the paperwork, but internal affairs just took over. There's something else you should know. Chen's voice lowered. Barrett's son reached out to me. He has recordings, months of his father bragging about targeting minorities at traffic stops. He's willing to testify. Maya's hand trembled slightly as she hung up. Her graduation speech would wait. History was unfolding, and she was helping write it. On her laptop, the view count on her video passed 10 million. Below it, a comment from a verified account caught her eye. As Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, I am deeply troubled by these events. The integrity of our justice system demands immediate action. Maya smiled, remembering her father's words from her first day of law school. Justice isn't just about laws, baby girl. It's about changing hearts and minds. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air. The storm was here, And it was digital, devastating, and unstoppable. Officer Barrett was about to learn that in 2024, justice moved at the speed of a viral video, and truth couldn't be handcuffed. Internal Affairs Detective Sarah Chen, no relation to Officer Chen, sat in her dimly lit office, her desktop screen illuminating stacks of personnel files. At 32, she was the youngest detective in IA history and the first Asian American woman in the department. Right now, those distinctions felt like lead weights on her shoulders. "You sure you want to pursue this?" Her supervisor's words from earlier echoed in her mind. Barrett's got friends in high places. Remember what happened to Martinez when she tried cleaning up the drug unit? Sarah clicked through the message logs she'd recovered from the department servers. A private group called Blue Shield revealed years of coordinated harassment. Barrett wasn't just a bad apple. He was an orchardist, cultivating bias throughout the force. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Parking garage. Level 3. 10 minutes. Come alone. Attached was a photo of Officer Barrett's badge. The garage was cold and concrete silent. Sarah's footsteps echoed as she approached a figure standing in the shadows. Not Barrett, younger, but with the same sharp jaw and stern eyes. "I'm Kevin Barrett," the figure said, stepping into the light. "Officer Barrett's son, and I have something you need to hear." Kevin pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly. "I've been recording Dad's phone calls for months. Started after I saw him laughing about ruining some black doctor's career with a bogus arrest. He paused, swallowing hard. "I've been attending Black Lives Matter meetings in secret. They helped me understand what he really is." The recordings played, each one more damning than the last. Barrett and his circle discussing targets, sharing locations of successful minorities' regular routes, celebrating their humble pie deliveries. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "He's my father," Kevin replied, his voice cracking. "But after Judge Washington, Dad came home laughing. Said he'd finally put that uppity judge in his place. That's when I realized, I'm not betraying my father. He betrayed his badge." Back in her office, Sarah's investigation expanded like a supernova. Officer Chen's testimony led to more whistleblowers, junior officers, dispatch operators, even cleaning staff. All had pieces of the puzzle. The Blue Shield group had tentacles throughout the department. Her computer pinged. A new email from Maya Washington contained a link to an encrypted folder. "Thought you should see these." The message read, "Dad's been keeping records." The folder contained 20 years' worth of suspicious traffic stop data, pattern analysis, and citizen complaints that had mysteriously vanished from official records. Judge Washington hadn't just been Barrett's victim. He'd been building a case. Sarah's door opened. Captain Rivera, head of Internal Affairs, entered with a grave expression. "Chen, you need to see this." Security footage played on her screen. Barrett in the evidence room at 3 a.m., removing his body cam footage. But he'd missed the backup system, the one Officer Chen had activated. "There's more," Rivera said. "We found similar patterns in 3 other precincts. This isn't just about Judge Washington anymore. This is systemic." Sarah's phone buzzed again. Kevin Barrett. "Dad knows I talked. He's drinking, angry. Says he's going to fix things at tomorrow's press conference. He's got his service weapon." She felt the weight of 20 years of institutional silence pressing down. Officers like Barrett had thrived because good people did nothing. But now, "Captain," she said, straightening her jacket, "I need a tactical team. And get me Judge Washington's attorney. It's time to end this." As she gathered her files, Sarah glanced at the photo on her desk. Her police academy graduation. She'd been so proud, so certain of her path. Now she understood. Sometimes protecting the badge meant standing against those who dishonored it. Her computer chimed one final time. An email from Judge Washington himself. "Detective Chen, I've reviewed your findings. Tomorrow at the press conference, let's not just expose the darkness. Let's light a path forward. Maya taught me something. Sometimes the best justice isn't punishment, but transformation. Sarah smiled, thinking of Kevin Barrett's courage, of Officer Chen's hidden camera, of all the small acts of resistance that had led to this moment. The blue wall wasn't cracking. It was being dismantled from within, brick by brick, by those who dared to stand for something greater than silence. The precinct interview room felt smaller than usual as Officer Chen faced Internal Affairs Detective Sarah Chen, 20 hours of body cam footage projected on the wall between them. The young officer's hands trembled around his coffee cup, badge number 2984 catching the fluorescent light. "Start from the beginning," Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. "When did you first notice Officer Barrett's pattern?" "My third week," Chen replied, setting down the cup. "There was this neurosurgeon, Dr. Williams. Barrett said we were doing a compliance check. Said successful minorities needed to remember their place. He swallowed hard. I stayed silent. First mistake of many." The door opened. Kevin Barrett entered, escorted by 2 officers. His father's features were softened by youth and remorse, his police academy rejection letter clutched in his hand. "Show them," he said quietly, placing his phone on the table. The recording began to play. "These people think a degree makes them special." Officer Barrett's voice crackled through the speaker. "That judge thinks he's above us because he wears a robe. Time to remind him what real authority looks like." "What's he going to do, Judge? File a complaint from his cell?" Sarah leaned forward. "When did your father change, Kevin? Was there a moment?" Kevin pulled out a worn photograph. Officer Barrett's academy graduation, 20 years ago. He stood proudly beside a black training officer, both smiling. Dad used to be different. Officer Jackson was his mentor, his best friend. Then Jackson reported another cop for excessive force. They found him dead 3 months later. Suicide. Dad said the brotherhood was all that mattered after that. Protecting our own. The interview room door opened again. Maya Washington strode in. Tablet in hand, her graduation regalia traded for a crisp suit. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up a database. "Every officer who reported misconduct in the past 20 years. Transfers, demotions, administrative leaves." Chen wasn't the first to try breaking the silence. Officer Chen stood suddenly. "There's something else." He retrieved his phone, hand steady now. Barrett's group chat. "They're planning something for the press conference. Said if they're going down, they're taking the whole department with them." Security footage from the evidence room appeared on the wall. Barrett and 3 other officers, removing files, copying data. Their movements precise, practiced. They'd done this before. It's all connected, Sarah realized. The targeting, the cover-ups, the missing evidence. They built a parallel system within the department. Not just harassment, systematic suppression of anyone who challenged them. Maya's tablet chimed. A message from her father. The press conference isn't just about exposing corruption. It's about offering redemption. Remember what you wrote in your graduation thesis. Justice without the possibility of transformation is just another form of oppression. Kevin stood, squaring his shoulders. "I'll testify. About everything. The meetings, the targets, the code words. Dad always said I was too soft for the force. Maybe he was right, but for the wrong reasons." Officer Chen nodded. "Me too. Full testimony." Barrett said we had to choose sides. "Well, I'm choosing." Sarah gathered the evidence files, each one a brick in the wall of silence they were about to tear down. But something in Kevin's photo caught her eye. She zoomed in on Officer Jackson's badge, number 2984, the same number now worn by Officer Chen. "Chen," she said slowly, "how did you get that badge number?" "Request list for new officers," he replied. "Said it was available." "Why?" Maya was already searching the database. Jackson's badge was retired after his death. Should never have been reissued. She looked up, eyes wide. Unless Barrett arranged it," Kevin finished. Dad always said Chen reminded him of Jackson. Same principles, same weakness. His voice hardened. Same threat. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Captain Rivera. Barrett just accessed the armory. Multiple weapons missing. Press conference in 3 hours. The room fell silent, the weight of realization settling over them. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about preventing history from repeating itself, about breaking the cycle 20 years in the making. Call Judge Washington, Sarah ordered, reaching for her service weapon. The press conference needs to be moved. And get me SWAT on standby. Barrett's not just planning to expose secrets, he's planning to bury them. The federal courthouse steps buzzed with anticipation. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like mechanical flowers. Judge Marcus Washington stood at the podium, his judicial robes replaced by a simple charcoal suit, his daughter Maya beside him. The bulletproof vest beneath his jacket was a silent reminder of the morning's threats. "We've got eyes on Barrett," Sarah Chen's voice crackled through Maya's earpiece. "He's in the parking structure, 3rd level. SWAT's in position." Marcus adjusted his microphone, scanning the crowd. Officer Chen stood at attention near the front, his badge catching the morning sun. Number 2984 glinting like a beacon. Kevin Barrett was there too, surrounded by protective detail, his father's graduation photo clutched in his trembling hands. 3 hours ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. Officer James Barrett accessed the police armory with intent to silence the truth. But the truth, like justice, cannot be killed with bullets. Movement in the parking structure caught Maya's eye. A flash of metal, a shadow shifting. 2 decades ago, Marcus continued, Officer Derek Jackson died protecting that truth. His death was no suicide. Officer Barrett, I know you're watching. I know you were there that night. The crowd murmured. Sarah's voice returned. He's moving. East stairwell. James, Marcus raised his voice, looking directly at the parking structure. I'm not here to end your career. I'm here to end the cycle. Derek wouldn't want his badge number used to perpetuate the very corruption he died fighting. A figure emerged from the shadows. James Barrett, service weapon drawn. SWAT laser sights danced across his chest, but he kept walking. You don't know what you're talking about, Judge, Barrett's voice cracked. You don't know what they did to Derek, what they made me do. Then tell them. Marcus stepped away from the podium, despite Maya's attempted restraint. Tell them how they threatened your family, how they made you choose between silence and survival. Tell them about the recording Derek made before he died. Barrett froze. Kevin stepped forward, recognition dawning on his face. The tape in your desk drawer, he said. The one you listen to every year on his anniversary. They said they'd kill you, Kevin. Barrett's hand trembled on his weapon, just like they killed Derek's kids. Car accident, they called it. But Derek knew too much, was going to expose the whole network. Judges, politicians, captains, all profiting from seized assets, targeted arrests. Marcus took another step forward. I found Derek's evidence last year, James. It's why they wanted me stopped. But it's not just my word anymore. Sarah Chen emerged from the crowd, holding up a flash drive. Officer Jackson's complete investigation. Hidden in plain sight. In his old badge number. Chen wasn't assigned 2984 by accident. Derek arranged it, knowing someday another officer would be brave enough to finish what he started. Barrett's weapon lowered slightly. You knew. All this time. I knew we needed proof, Marcus replied. Derek died protecting that proof. You've been protecting his killer for 20 years, James. It's time to protect his legacy instead. The morning sun crested the courthouse dome as Barrett looked at his son, at the photo of his academy graduation, at Officer Chen wearing his best friend's badge number. 20 years of guilt, fear, and anger warred on his face. Chief Rodriguez, he said finally, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. February 14th, 2004. He gave the order. I recorded everything. Derek's evidence, the threats, the network. It's all in a safe deposit box. Keys in my desk, under Derek's photo. The weapon clattered to the ground. As SWAT moved in, Barrett turned to Marcus. I don't deserve forgiveness. No, Marcus agreed, but you deserve the chance to make it right. That's what justice is about, not just punishment, but restoration. Maya stepped forward, her legal pad ready. Start from the beginning. Officer Barrett. Every name, every crime, every cover-up. It's time to tear down the blue wall the right way, brick by brick, truth by truth. As Barrett began to speak, Marcus watched Officer Chen, Derek Jackson's spiritual successor, taking notes. The badge number that had once symbolized silence now represented a voice for change. Sometimes, he reflected, justice worked in mysterious ways. The press conference hadn't gone as planned. It had gone better. 1 year later, the Police Academy graduation ceremony took place under bright June skies. Judge Marcus Washington stood at the podium, his robes flowing in the gentle breeze, facing a sea of fresh faces, the most diverse class in the department's history. When I was arrested that night, he began, I thought I knew everything about justice. 20 years on the bench, thousands of cases, countless decisions. But true justice, I learned, isn't found in law books. It's found in moments of choice. In the front row, Officer Chen sat beside his mentor, James Barrett, now wearing a different kind of uniform. After serving 6 months for his role in the corruption scandal, Barrett had embraced a new mission, training future officers in ethics and bias prevention. His testimony had led to 37 arrests, including 3 judges and the former police chief. Today, you join a transformed department, Marcus continued. But transformation isn't just about new policies or procedures. It's about people brave enough to choose truth over tradition, justice over brotherhood, right over easy. Maya Washington, now a civil rights attorney, smiled from her seat. Her father had kept his promise, not just exposing corruption, but helping build something better from the ashes. The humble pie cases had become required study at the academy, a stark reminder of power's capacity to corrupt. Kevin Barrett, wearing his newly earned police uniform, caught his father's eye. The badge on his chest, number 2984, had been specially reassigned. Derek Jackson's legacy would live on, carried by an officer who understood its weight. Last week, Marcus's voice softened. A white judge was stopped by police on this very street. But this time, something different happened. The officers followed protocol, showed respect, and upheld their oath. Small progress, perhaps, but progress nonetheless. Sarah Chen, recently promoted to captain of internal affairs, nodded from her seat. The department's transformation hadn't been easy. Some had resigned in protest. Others had fought change at every turn. But the blue wall had crumbled, replaced by transparent policies and real accountability. Your badges carry a deeper meaning now, Marcus gestured to the graduating class. They represent not just authority, but responsibility. Not just power, but purpose, each of you. He paused as movement caught his eye. Through the crowd, a familiar figure approached, Carlos Rodriguez, the young man from the holding cell a year ago. Now he wore cadet blues, his valedictorian sash gleaming in the sunlight. Each of you, Marcus continued, has the power to choose what kind of officer you'll be. The power to. Suddenly, police radios crackled to life. A situation downtown. Armed suspect. Possible hostages. The graduates tensed, ready for their first real test. Go, Marcus nodded to Barrett. Show them what real police work looks like. As Barrett led a response team, including both Chen and his son, Marcus watched the old and new generations merge. The department's transformation was still ongoing, but the foundation had been laid. Maya approached the podium as the ceremony concluded. Dad, remember what you said that night in the cell, about experiencing something firsthand. Marcus smiled, straightening his bow tie. Some habits never change. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best changes. Your graduation speech taught me that. They watched as Carlos Rodriguez received his badge, Barrett pinning it himself. The former antagonist and his one-time target's protege, united in purpose. Sometimes justice worked in perfect circles. Sarah Chen joined them, her captain's bars catching the light. Judge, we've got the first year's data. Racial profiling incidents down 80%. Civilian complaints reduced by half. And voluntary reporting of misconduct up by 300%. Numbers are good, Marcus nodded, but it's the stories that matter. Like that white judge last week, stopped by Officer Barrett himself. Professional, respectful, by the book. Full circle, Maya smiled. As the ceremony ended, Marcus watched the new officers dispersing into the city, each carrying a piece of the transformation he'd helped spark. Each ready to prove that justice wasn't dead, it was evolving. Ready to head back to court? Maya asked. Marcus adjusted his robes, thinking of that night 1 year ago. Sometimes you had to step down from the bench to raise the bar of justice. Actually, he smiled, I think I'll ride along with Barrett's team today. Some lessons you never stop learning. The revolution hadn't just changed the department. It had changed them all.